Entaro Adun, Executor. I am Judicator Aldaris. I have been sent by the Conclave to serve and counsel you. The former Executor, Tassadar, was commanded to halt the Zerg progress in the Terran sector by burning the infested human worlds. Unfortunately, he disregarded his orders and attempted to destroy the Zerg while sparing the Terrans from the flame. Clearly, Tassadar has failed us. You must not. The Conclave has dictated that our first priority is to strengthen our defenses. You must reinforce our outpost in Antioch and make certain that the province does not fall to the Zerg. Your old comrade, Protoss Phoenix, will meet you there and assist you in this endeavor.
Hi everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Starcraft, and in today's episode we will be entering the final third of the game. This is the beginning of the Protoss Campaign. Now, whereas before with the Terrans we've had sort of infinite diversity, with the Zerg it was infinite numbers, the Protoss is pretty much infinite power, or at least that's the way that they're designed. The way that they go overall is that you can't make as many Protoss units as you can Terran and Zerg just due to supply issues. I think there's only one Protoss unit which has a supply of one, everything else is at least two. However, Protoss units are a lot stronger than Terran and Zerg units in a one-for-one fight. So really a lot of it is about keeping your stuff alive as much as you can. And eventually, if you can just build up a decent sized army, you'll crush pretty much anything that's in front of you. Those of you who have noticed that I pretty much never micro whatsoever will have noticed that I did micro a Dragoon back there, microing that Zealot back as well. Basically, we're just trying to keep them out of the fight. And you can see the Protoss have a sort of half and half system, whereas the Terrans have no regenerative capabilities whatsoever. The Zerg completely regenerate. The Protoss kind of do a half and half deal. They have health which doesn't regenerate, and they have shields which regenerate pretty quickly on their own. So sort of half and half, although mainly it's shields. So shields are going to be one of the upgrades that you're definitely going to be looking out for. We've got two units here. We have the Zealot, which is a short range, well, it's a melee range unit, which does... So you have the Zergling for the Zerg, which is a melee unit. It deals 5 damage per shot. The Zealot does 8 damage per shot, but it has 2 attacks when it does that 8 damage per shot. So Zealots, when they're fully upgraded, I believe do 22 damage for each of those each of those attacks that they do. Zealots will do 22 damage for, which is twice as much damage as a Hydralist does per shot. And also, as opposed to doing a lot of damage for a basic unit, they're also tanky as hell. I believe they have something like... Oh, get that Dragoon out of there. I believe they have something like 140 or 160 hit points if you count their shields, which compared to a Marine which has, I think, 40 or 45. And, oh look, we have a friend. Oh wait, no! So after that work that I put in trying to keep the Dragoons alive, they decided they were too fat to walk through this area and ended up running into a load of Zerg. Never mind, you can get bogged down a little bit in the fact that the game's pathfinding is terrible. And it's still terrible. Let's just... Oh, for God's sake. This is... Apparently it can't get through that gap. You think that... Never mind, get back here. Now, Phoenix did mention that he wanted to build photon cannons. I won't be doing that. Okay, now he mentions that he wanted to build photon cannons. I won't be doing that. It's just the Zerg aren't a threat in this mission, and it's just a waste of 150 minerals, which could be a Dragoon or another Zealot. So I will not be doing that. And here's the basic Protoss gimmick. Instead of building a building or transforming into a building like the Terran and Zerg do, the probe can just simply open a rift and then go off and do something else. This makes the Protoss very sort of easy to get an economy up going for, because you don't have to quote-unquote waste a worker on building something. But the Protoss have a sort of creep idea, whereas the Zerg can only build on the creep. The Protoss can only build a building in the range of a pylon, and if a pylon is destroyed that is within the, which is causing a building to be in range, the building will power down. So it's kind of a weak point, as it were, for the Protoss. If they place pylons badly, you can get pylons sniped down, and therefore buildings end up not doing anything. One thing you'll kind of notice about the Protoss is that everything is expensive, but everything is powerful. If you look at Fenix, this is one of my favourite characters, actually. I think that he's, he seems one of the more down-to-earth people amongst a race of psychic gods, which is what the Protoss pretty much are. But he is powerful as all hell. He's a zealot with 480 health, and he also has 40 damage Psyblades, which, he can one-shot Zerglings, two-shot Hydralisks, all that sort of good stuff. Now, the buildings that we've got at the moment, we have a forge, which is the Protoss upgrade area. It's their evolution chamber / their engineering bay. But the thing is, with the Protoss, you have 3 things that you can upgrade. You have ground weapons, which is every weapon, be it ranged or melee. It's just all ground weapons. You have shields, which is all shields, and even buildings in this game have shields, so it affects absolutely everything. And then you have ground armor, which is the least useful of any of them, just due to the fact that ground armor doesn't actually do much, because number one, Protoss have way less health than, they don't have as much health as shields. And for it to be useful, you need to more pathfinding issues, and so it's generally the 3rd thing that you will upgrade. I'm only going to put 1 or 2 probes in gas at this point, because I'm going to build an army that's mainly zealots. Dragoons, you can have 5 zealots for the same cost as 4 dragoons, and to be honest, certainly when zealots are upgraded, they deal damage just as quickly, if not more, than a dragoon. The only thing they lose is the ability to shoot anywhere, which is pretty much what a dragoon can do. Not saying dragoons aren't awesome, but they're a bit slow and cumbersome sometimes. So, yep, this is where the old pylons and probes mantra comes in. And that's all I'm doing at the moment, just pretty much building pylons and probes, and then I will put a second gateway down and start building units. The Zerg base on this map isn't really too much of a threat, so we can just start bringing in zealots now. And you can see how slow they are to build when you compare to a Zergling or a Marine. So Protoss play, certainly against the AI, Protoss play tends to be very sort of turtly. You're not incredibly mobile early on. Protoss air units are very powerful, but they're also very expensive. So, you really do have to play kind of turtly early on. You don't have the advantage of being able to spam out sort of 12 to 24 Marines really quickly and just going for it. I'm going to build the cybernetics core because I may want to build dragoons in the future. And as you can see, the shield upgrade is super expensive. Level 1 shields is 200 minerals, 200 gas, and then it goes 300, 300 and 400, 400. So it's super expensive, but unlike many of the other upgrades, it affects every unit you have, be it ground, air, or even if it's a building. So that's why the shield upgrade is really expensive. But especially when you start moving into some of the real top-end units, you're going to want max level shields, because there are some units that the Protoss have which are pretty much all shields and no health whatsoever. And we will definitely be using those as the campaign goes. So, storyline-wise, the Zerg have invaded Aya at this point. The Overmind has implanted itself on Aya. There's still a lot of fighting going on Char, where Kerrigan and the Protoss are still battling in the wake of her rebirth. However, in a little bit of at least what I feel is a little bit of a disappointment, Kerrigan doesn't appear again in the Protoss campaign. I thought that there would have been a lot more, I think there would have been a bit more scope to have her appear a bit more in the Protoss campaign. Certainly, I mean, she doesn't have to be a fightable enemy, she doesn't have to be killable or anything like that, but I feel like they made such a big deal out of her in the Zerg and Terran campaign, and then for her to become a little bit of an afterthought at this point is a little bit disappointing, but I don't think that it'll be the last that we see of her somehow. Okay, just going to research Dragoon extended range. Dragoon range is pretty rubbish if you don't have the extended range, and they are pretty. As you can see, they're very waddly, very slow, but they do pack a lot of firepower. Ooh, Fenix has got himself in a bit of a mess here. His shields are dropping, but it's okay. He can kill all that lot quite easily, and we'll just let his shields regenerate and he will be fine. So let's get these dragoons back out here and just keep building zealots and dragoons, I guess. It looks like I'm building half a dozen dragoons or so. I think that that's okay here. The Zerg does have access to Mutalisks, and while it doesn't have enough to make you feel really worried about what you're going to be doing, it's obviously fine to just have them available. I've got a bit of spare cash at the moment, so I'm going to build a second gateway. Should be able to produce 2 zealots at a time, or a zealot and a dragoon at the same time. I think that should be okay. And as you can see, the buildings just warp in. Apparently, according to the lore, the buildings are all built on Aya and then they're just warped in, which seems to be a bit of an eggs basket theory, really. And you can see Phoenix's shields going back up there quite nicely. And once I get level 1 shields, he will take 1 less damage to his shields. It acts very much like armor does. Unfortunately, the whole armor plus shields thing doesn't work as well as you would hope. It's not cumulative. So I'm afraid that you'll just have to deal with not being that. Just have to deal with 3 being about as far as you go. Also, many Protoss units don't actually have any base armor or base shields. That's something that I found to be really strange. Whereas, say, an Ultralisk has base, I think, 2 armor, is it? Something like that. It's 1 or 2. No, it's 2 armor. Is it? I honestly can't remember. It might be base 1. Armor, and there are other things which have base. I think a battle cruiser has like base 2 armor or something like that. So those things that have base armor and then you get 3, they can make early game units really irrelevant. They don't make these sort of units that irrelevant. Certainly not Protoss units, because Protoss units have high enough damage to sort of mitigate that. Oh, I see the enemy's decided to be funny, has he, and just float a Mutalisk into my base. Well, These photon charges do 20 damage, but I'm not sure what to. Because as you can see, it takes sort of 10 or 11 hits to destroy a Mutalisk. I think that Dragoons do less damage to... Dragoons do less damage to sort of... I don't know if it's armoured units or small units or something like that. Basically, there's not many things that Dragoons actually do full damage to. But as you can see there, that was a fairly big attack, and that sort of shows you how tough Zealots are, because that was a fairly decent attack and I didn't lose a single Zealot to that attack. Ah, maybe they do full damage to Overlords. Cool. But I think that this force should be pretty much enough, so yep. God, my heart was in my mouth for a minute, then I thought that that was an infested Terran, but the Zerg don't have access to them in this mission, at least. And if you're wondering what an infested Terran is, number one, it's obviously been a while since you played Starcraft, and they're nasty, put it that way. And you'll be seeing them a little bit later as well. Although fortunately the AI is just as dumb with infested Terrans as it is with pretty much any unit and its pathfinding, so you can generally get away with fighting on that front. Okay. Zealot Dragoon Swarm, I'm going to do my usual and just abandon micro completely at this point. This force is totally overwhelming against a Zerg base of this size, so I think we're just going to take absolutely everything down and we'll be fine. The one thing you will notice when you're playing as the Protoss against the Zerg don't half like their colonies, like their sunken colonies and their spore colonies. You will see defences after defences after defences. It will just be such a nightmare for you to break through an awful lot of the time. And you just have to deal with it, unfortunately. Fortunately, there's not too much in the way of defences at this base, but you will see some pretty, you'll see some pretty horrific defensive gatherings. Well, yeah, Zealots aren't too bad at taking out sunken colonies. Reasoning for that being that you know, they have, I think, 140 health or 120 health, so with armour it takes 4 shots to kill a Zealot. And a Zealot and I think a Zealot fires a little bit quicker, so, you know, between sort of 4 or 5 shots a Zealot can do 80 damage, so if you throw 5 or 6 Zealots around a sunken colony, they'll kill it pretty quickly, and it won't be able to do much damage back. I just find it cool. I mean, it looks like a tongue, doesn't it? And it's really a spike, but whatever.
You know, Executive, although we two have marched across hundreds of worlds together, I never imagined that we would be fighting on Aya. The Zerg are indeed worthy foes.
Or they just know where your home world is and went straight for the throat. But they are indeed worthy foes, and you will find out why sooner or later. Anyway guys, that's it for the first Protoss mission. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I will be releasing videos at a rapid pace until we get to the end, and hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.